With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The UK and France signed a January 6 letter of intent to deploy troops to Ukraine if a peace deal is reached, aiming to provide security guarantees after a ceasefire. Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Emmanuel Macron said the force would not be combat troops, but would support Ukraine through military hubs and protective facilities.
The purpose of the Coalition of the Willing is to help deliver a peace that can last, and to work with the US to guarantee Ukraine's security for the long term.
France and Germany are coordinating a European response to overtures from the Trump administration about acquiring Greenland from Denmark. The issue gained renewed attention after U.S. actions in Venezuela and statements framing Greenland as a U.S. national security priority in the Arctic, with military force described as an option. Paris said it would work with Berlin and Warsaw on a joint approach, while Germany confirmed coordination with Denmark. Washington has indicated the rhetoric is aimed at prompting negotiations as Denmark and Greenland seek talks with U.S. officials. UK and EU authorities are demanding answers from X and XAI after reports that Grok has been used to generate sexually explicit images, including outputs that appear to depict minors. UK regulator Ofcom said January 5th it had made urgent contact with X and XAI to assess compliance with legal duties to protect users and would swiftly review whether issues warrant investigation. An EU Commission spokesman said the bloc is taking the matter very seriously, calling such content illegal. Malaysia's regulator also opened a probe on January 3rd. The U.S. military announced it seized 2 oil tankers in the Atlantic and Caribbean for violating U.S. sanctions, including the Russian-flagged Bella 1 and the stateless tanker Sophia. Authorities said the vessels were linked to illicit oil activity involving Venezuela. Russia protested the seizure of Bella 1 as disproportionate. The action followed the arrest of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, who has pleaded not guilty to U.S. charges. President Trump said sanctioned Venezuelan oil would be transferred to the U.S. and sold under U.S. control. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage announced former senior Crown prosecutor Layla Cunningham as Reform UK's London mayoral candidate, pitching a broken window-style crackdown on crime to challenge Labour's Sadiq Khan in 2027.
See, Londoners like me have lost faith in the law. The social contract and the state has failed in its first duty to keep us safe. This is the London that Sadiq Khan has created. A city where criminals operate freely, where victims are sacrificed, ignored. People are scared. And Khan thinks it's enough to tweet platitudes, random stats. Because let's face it, Khan never accepts responsibility. No, he attacks anyone who says London's dangerous. He calls them far right, racist. He ludicrously says that criticism of his record is because he's Muslim, and we are all Islamophobic. Frankly, it's an insult to victims and to Londoners.
Nigel Farage has warned of a looming Brexit betrayal as Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's government prepares a major bill to align UK regulations and standards more closely with the European Union as part of a reset with Brussels. Ministers argue EU-aligned rules would cut paperwork for firms serving both markets, but critics say disputes could shift to EU institutions like the European Court of Justice, while the UK has no vote on rules.
I promise you, I did not spend over a quarter of a century fighting for us to get back self-control of our country, to watch Starmer give it all away after Tory failure without a real fight. And part of that fight will be the elections on May the 7th, where we will make sure that Brexit betrayal is a real, live political issue.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria. But it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share the results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome to the Protagonists, our first one for the year. Didn't last year fly by so fast? I mean, I'm looking at our guest, Greg Simons, Oliver Boyd Barrett, and they haven't aged at all. It's just amazing. It's amazing what a mud pack will do for you. Maybe we'll find out later the secrets of that everlasting youth. President Trump's kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro will have great impact on Venezuelan, American and global affairs, and least of all, Donald Trump's fortunes. Now, this may take time to manifest. We hope our panel will provide their insights on the depth and breadth of this event. While the administration has been inconsistent on its reasons for attacking Maduro, most have discounted the original justification of drug trafficking and cited other reasons such as regime change, theft of Venezuelan oil reserves and other critical resources for the enrichment of Trump's donors and friends, the appeasement of Israel and to sabotage Russian and Chinese strategic interest. It is perhaps all of the above. Right now, it appears the regime continues without as much as a pause, unless you're Maduro, and then it stopped. It does seem clear that the deals have been done. So what do we expect to follow? Removal of sanctions, economic reform, electoral reform, release of political prisoners, and ultimately a better deal for the Venezuelan people. And what about Russia and China? What will they do? Let's talk to our panel on the meaningful effects of Trump's most audacious and unlawful act. And who is running the White House anyway, Trump or deep state? Our panel is a bit smaller at the moment because we are waiting on one other to join us. Dr. Greg Simons is professor at Daffodil University in Bangladesh and is a geopolitical commentator, and Professor Emeritus Oliver Boyd Barrett, who hates to go to bed early, from the US at the moment. He's from Bowling Green University. And our third guest, hopefully we'll be here very shortly from Amsterdam. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. And how do you see 2026, Oliver?
I'm not terribly optimistic that it will be any better than 2025, and I think the indications at the moment are that it will be considerably worse. I think one thing that most of us can agree on, at least in the world of alternative media, is that the mask of benevolence, if it ever existed in the case of Trump, has now most definitely been dropped. And we are witnessing a naked grasp for power, even worse in many ways, I think, than that which we experienced during the 19th century.
And Greg Simons, welcome, by the way, to 2026. I was lying about you not aging. You've aged very well. But what's your views on 2026 before we get into Venezuela?
Well, I mean, yeah, 2025 was an absolute cluster, but I think at this stage, 2026 is going to outdo it. I mean, it's just going into new territory that should never be stepped into, because if we look back in history, when the US and the West arrogantly do something like Kosovo, it sets a precedent. And the president, and now, I mean, is already making what Kosovo was look like child's play. And they're doing this in a moment where it's clear they're in quite a decline, which is why you're having these desperate gambles, which are, as Oliver said, exposing the United States led West for what it really is. I mean, there is no mask, and no amount of lipstick can cover this pig.
We've just got a bit of noise there coming in at the moment from one of our producers. We'll just keep going. Greg, can you just tell me, did you ever expect? I know you're a great fan of Donald Trump, as with Oliver. Can you just tell me, did you ever expect that a Western or a US president would ever kidnap a leader of another country, no matter how bad he is? But did you ever imagine that Donald Trump would kidnap another leader? And let's keep the hatred away from this of Donald Trump. And even for someone as you admire, not at all with Donald Trump, for him to kidnap a leader of another country, it just seems highly irregular, even in Donald Trump's mind.
Well, I mean, he is in a desperate situation. I mean, none of his foreign policy worked out the way he anticipated, so he really had to pull off all stops. I mean, before this had happened, I wouldn't put it past him for doing it, although I would say the probability would have been low, because once you do something like this, then the stops are off. Other countries can then do this kind of thing. But I mean, I think this was done more for his ego and self-aggrandizement than anything about US security, and that's just a nonsense. And this is where you're getting these mockeries coming in, where now they're saying it's called the Don Roe doctrine rather than the Monroe doctrine. So you've got already the sarcasm coming in, and I mean you can see now that already these indictments are being altered because they were so ridiculous. And when you hear Trump talking now, it's like, hey, wait a minute, where did all that narco-terrorism talk go? Because that's almost disappeared, and now it's oil, 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 to use use and abuse the expression. And he is just salivating at the prospect of making money, not for the US state, and certainly the consequences are not being considered. I mean, what in I would say a fairly interesting result from Latin America but the extent to which they are prepared to go to reinforce and enforce this new version of, or reinvigorated Monroe Doctrine is going to be very costly in terms of treasure and eventually blood, because from what I see, Venezuelan people, even if they did not like Maduro, do not like what has been done to their country.
Our third guest has arrived, Professor Kees van der Pijl. He's a political economist and author. Professor, thank you for joining us. We're just trying to we want you to look into your crystal ball, if you wouldn't mind, and tell us your thoughts on what joys 2026 will bring us.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Sorry for confusion with the computer technology. Can you hear me now?
We can, and we're getting you loud and clear. So we just would like you to look into your cup of tea and tell us what your views of what do you think the world will be like during 2026.
Well, it's not. I'm just out of bed, so it's a question that I'm extremely worried because the last speaker just spoke about the Donroe Doctrine, but the Donroe Doctrine has as one of its peculiarities that it no longer works. So the United States has now, that was the message I just saw pass, withdrawn from a number of United Nations organizations, and that reminds me of the 1930s when Italy and Germany all left the League of Nations so as not to be free to pursue their national power purposes. I think that Russia and China have helped Venezuela to climb out of the deep pit that they were in with their neglected oil industry, and they won't give up. So it will be a matter of how far Trump is going to go. Of course, the seizing of the tanker in open international waters somewhere mid-Atlantic is a serious breach of law, but there were already many breaches of law, and we only have to think of the Maduro couple, locked up now, probably for life, if you ask me. That's all very sad, but these things do not change the major shifts that are underway in the international balance of forces. And I think this is the first time in history that a contender bloc, that is a bloc of states challenging the liberal capitalist West, is in the process of actually overcoming its resistance and refusing to be drawn into an all-out war.
Oliver, I asked Greg before his views on Donald Trump, whether he thought Donald Trump would ever do such a thing and kidnap the leader of another country. Did you ever think, I mean, and again, I know your views on Donald Trump, which is shared by just about all of us. Did you ever think, though, that this president would ever go to such extremes?
It actually doesn't come that much of a surprise to me, Mike. We've seen the United States capture a South American president before, when Bush captured Noriega back in 1989. And then, of course, we've seen the decapitation strike against Saddam Hussein. We saw the butchering of Gaddafi in Libya. So this is not so unusual. I think in the terms of trying to establish a context for this that makes any sense, and I think there is sense, unfortunately. I think the sense is to do with an increasingly desperate United States exerting more and more power to maintain its global hegemony, which militarily it has. And one of the worrying features, what we are seeing now, I worry. I am not sure whether Russia and China. I've kind of given up on the United Nations doing anything terribly useful, given in the crises that we have faced over the past few years, including Gaza. I have been hoping that Russia and China would show backbone, and maybe they will, and maybe they are being incredibly smart and intelligent and restrained in not taking action. But I also worry that what we are actually seeing is the continuing play of a logic of of a fear of uh, 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 mutually assured destruction. I think this logic still plays out, regardless of Russia's Oreshnik and Berezovsky and Poseidon and all these other wonderful weapons that Russia keeps telling us it is producing. Are they actually relevant to anything, really? And I'm beginning to think, no. All I'm seeing is Russia being incredibly persistent, and I have always supported the logic behind Russia's SMO, but I'm seeing an obsession now about Ukraine when the rest of the world is going to hell. And Russia and China don't seem to know what they're doing. They've had plenty of weeks now to figure out Venezuela. They've had plenty of time to establish a game plan. And frankly, I am not seeing anything that convinces me that they have one.
So why would this be? I mean, you would think that Russia and China, I mean, as a collective together, they have, I would think, great foresight and a lot of intel between them. So why would this be? Why are they sort of meandering?
Well, if the question is to me, Mike, I will quickly say that I go back to my point. I think they're beginning to.
We've lost your audio at the moment. If we could just, what we might do is Greg Simons. We just lost Oliver's audio. If you could just continue where the question I asked Oliver was, why are they sort of floundering, or not floundering? Why haven't they done anything, China and Russia?
I would say they are up to something behind the scenes, but unlike the US and unlike Europe, they understand actions have consequences. And so, therefore, if you do these things, there will be a consequence, especially when you get someone as deranged and on a power trip as Donald Trump, and when you have a collective as spineless and as weak as the EU. And because now, I mean, you can see, I mean, the EU has just understood from their spineless actions and their enablement and supporting of such regime changes. They are also on the menu now with Greenland, and it's somehow come as a shock to them. I'm not sure why, because this is the natural result. And I think Russia and China are just watching this circus go around. I mean, there's not much you need to do at this stage. And I mean, okay, so they've got Maduro and his wife, who they roughed up along the way. And that doesn't mean that the country is going to follow, because national interests of Venezuela do not change with the leadership. They remain solid. And you can see the public reaction in Venezuela if you get off the infantile and deranged reporting of Western mainstream media. They're not happy about this. And you can also see increasingly, I mean, the Colombian president, I mean, Trump is in a position now where he has going to actually have to continually escalate this. And when an empire like the US goes into decline, I mean, these escalations are what accelerates the decline. And he's already threatened, was it Mexico? He's threatened Nicaragua, he's Colombia and Cuba. And so where is it going to stop? And now he's also, I mean, got the EU have come to the realization, oops, we're on the menu too. You know, it's great to have such friends like the, but I mean, these idiots do not know their history. They do not even consider these things which the US has always said out loud historically. I mean, Kissinger said the US has no permanent enemies and no permanent allies. It only has permanent interests, and its permanent interests are global hegemony. And this parasitic empire survives by living off other people's resources.
Professor Vanderpyle, what's your views? Do you think China and Russia will retaliate in some way, or are they going to sit on their hands for a while?
No, well, I don't think they will retaliate militarily, except, of course, with the ongoing operation in Ukraine. But apparently, and this is a field that other experts must come in, apparently they are pursuing a legal route to enforce the property they have and the contracts that they have to restore the Venezuelan oil industry and purchase its products. And I've read that, for instance, the planned use of the frozen Russian assets in Euroclear in Belgium is now being challenged in the courts, and that will be a very long trajectory through the court system to get that money back and to make the European countries pay not just the amount that was frozen, but also the interest and the lost profits and so on. And apparently China is doing something similar with respect to the contracts they have with Venezuela and the debts that Venezuela has incurred. So I agree with the other speakers that Venezuela has fixed interests, and these interests are now tied to the strategy that Russia and especially China are pursuing in the courts.
Yeah, I do agree with you too, Oliver. You were cut out before, and you were giving us your thoughts on.
Yeah, I think I'll just go back to my first point, which was that I think we need to see this in the context of a desperate empire, the U.S. empire, threatened by BRICS, threatened by the possibility of a multipolar order, and hitting back very hard, very soon, before chance really to get their act together. But the United States, I think, through Trump, is beginning to understand that if it is, and it is, determined to maintain its status as global hegemon, it has to hit now, and it has to hit hard. It's dropping the mask, and it's finding, regrettably, that actually bullying of this scale actually works. Much as we may love Rodriguez or of course, Maduro, or more importantly, in my view, the Bolivarian Revolution and the legacy of Simon Bolivar, one of the most heroic figures, I believe, in the whole history of national liberation. But nonetheless, the dominoes are falling because Trump just shouts and waves his big stick, and these countries don't have sensible armies. They gave up on armies. They've gone soft, all of them. Brazil is just pathetic. in the strength in the convincingness of its protest to the United States about this invasion of a neighboring power. For the moment, the United States is demonstrating that power works. And in most other countries of the world throughout the global south, they are not ready for this. And Colombia may very well fall. Petro has only got a few more months in his presidency. He can't stand again. But at the moment, until recent events, the prediction was that he would be succeeded by someone from within his own party. So we'll see what goes on with Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia. These are all looking quite dicey prospects. Iran, and this raises the issue as to whether, as some people are arguing, taking comfort almost from the fact that they can argue that perhaps this is a demonstration of a spheres of influence doctrine that's suddenly been adopted by Trump, and that this will sort of give space to Russia and China to do what they want in there. But I think that's just nonsense, mainly because there is no evidence for it. What we see, if we're just looking for the evidence, what we see is that the United States is as determined as ever to contain China, to prepare for some kind of blockade of China, which involves destroying or making problems at the various choke points of supplies of energy to China. I don't think that Trump has withdrawn from Ukraine at all. I mean, he may have gotten the Europeans to spend their money paying for the weapons and sending the weapons to Ukraine, but the CIA is basically running the show, as is increasingly evident, and they're becoming increasingly bold in attacking Russian nuclear facilities, and B, even attempting the assassination of the Russian president. This is not a spheres of influence logic at all. And besides, if you're going for spheres of influence, then it has to be sort of reciprocal. You've got to have a kind of deal with the other people that you give me this and I'll give you this. There's nothing of that kind. No evidence whatsoever of any kind of deal of that kind. And I don't believe that there is one.
Greg, yeah, you're an expert on the media. It's part of your profession. It's really interesting reading, not between the lines, but it would seem that the majority of reports from both independent media and also legacy media are supporting Donald Trump in many ways. Do you know of any mass distribution of Kool-Aid? Because they all seem to be drinking the same stuff. And I mean, I don't understand. I mean, this is, you simply do not kidnap a leader of another country. There are other ways of doing it. I mean, do it the old JFK way, just assassinate him, but you don't need to kidnap him. And just to part two on that one, if you wouldn't mind commenting, he'll be tried in New York. How far do you think they'll get with that? Because you can't kidnap a leader of another country.
No, I mean, you've already had the sarcastic quip that Maduro is the first foreign citizen to illegally enter the United States without a visa. So you already have some mockery at this. You have this, yeah, but it's funny not only seeing the media how they're supporting this because he's a dictator or believing this garbage about narco-terrorism and all of these other things. And I mean, I'm surprised there's some reasonably sensible people otherwise that buy into this, and they buy into the lies, like they bought into the Iraq invasion, like Libya, like so many other of these regime change or attempted regime change operations. So essentially, a lot of people have learned nothing about this culture and practice of deception by their government and by the mass media being complicit in this deception. And yeah, I mean, you've done this action now I mean, there will be consequences because the US can't just do something like this and expect no one else will do so in the future. I mean, they did this with Kosovo and violated one of these tenets of international relations and international law. And this resulted in Crimea and enabled that. So, what will this enable later on down the track? And I mean, you can just see how the whole thing is being. How do we prosecute them? It's no longer narco-terrorism. They dug out, I think, a bit of legislation from the 1930s, which referred to the possession of automatic weapons, and decided to prosecute them on that. And I mean, how far do you want to fish? I mean, it's just ridiculous. The world is watching this garbage. And then they're watching Trump, who's no longer talking about narco terrorism. I mean, he's talking about all these opportunities about plundering oil and doing and getting China and Russia, Iran, any other country he doesn't like out of the country, which really supports that whole thing about Ukraine when they said a country should be able to determine its own foreign policy without interference from other countries. So the hypocrisy and the just the contradictions are massive. And I don't think it's going to stop there. I think, I mean, Mamdani has already made a comment on this, and he got shot down. You're only the mayor. You're not to be consulted on international relations. But I mean, I think what most don't realise, this potentially will result in massive repercussions. It is as has been said. I mean, this is like reliving the 1930s when you're having this withdrawal from these different understandings, these different institutions, which are meant to create stability and predictability among the relations between countries. And then you have Donald Trump, who says, "Oh, I'm unpredictable. I can do this, that, and every other thing." But he's doing that with a dying empire, and the dying empire requires a new host. And I mean, this is going to go bad places.
Oliver, I just wanted your thoughts on the cartels of Venezuela. I mean, sure, Donald Trump has kidnapped, whisked away with the big, beautiful rescuers of the free world. But if you look at the cartels, I mean, I would probably think that Maduro is more of a figurehead. We'll put him up there, and the cartels are like puppeteers. You just wonder where their hands are. So I'm just thinking that perhaps that, sure, he may have Maduro, but the real problem, if he has a problem, lies within the cartels. If the cartels are what they say, if he wants to have reform and all that sort of garbage with Venezuela and economic benefits for the US, you would think he would have to negotiate with those magnificent cartels, big, beautiful cartels, as he would describe them.
Yeah. Well, I think the cartels is one of dozens of aspects to the complexity of South America that North American politicians have zero interest in and zero knowledge of. Part of the garbage charges that are being made against Maduro are that he was head of or a major party to the so-called Tren de Agua cartel. That's absolutely ridiculous. In fact, Maduro was very instrumental in bringing about the dismantling of Tren de Agua in Venezuela. This whole business of drugs is a long-established pretext that has been used by North America for its interventions in South America. 10 years or so ago, it was a big factor in U.S. intervention in the internal affairs of Colombia. there's barely any substance. Anytime you hear North American politicians talking about their concerns about drug cartels in South America, what they're really talking about is finding ways of getting their greasy little fingers over South American territory for the purposes of mineral extraction and expropriation. So it's just one of those pretexts, like, for example, humanitarianism, or hey, they owe us money sort of pretext. We've just got to start playing with these nonsense discourses that US media pretend to take seriously. And I think European media, because US media are pretending to take it seriously, they decide it must be serious. And of course, it's not. There are so many aspects to the charges against Maduro that need exploring. I would strongly recommend anyone who's interested in this to check out a wonderful dissection of the charges by Max Blumenthal just very recently on the gray zone. It gets a little bit complicated. It's not really possible to summarize the main points here, but I will just pick out the single main point is that the Department of Justice in the United States hasn't even bothered to demonstrate that Maduro is an illegitimate president of Venezuela. Because if he's legitimate, and in Venezuelan law he is legitimate, then the United States is clearly violating international law by taking the action that it has against Maduro. Now, this whole question of whether the elections of 2024 were fixed, I am not an expert in elections, and I'm not particularly knowledgeable about the 2024 elections in Venezuela, but if I have to bet any money on it, I'm going to say the claim that these elections were rigged is baseless, and I also, whether or not there were irregularities, I would also like to express my anger at the readiness with which the president of Brazil, Lula, a man whom until now I have greatly admired, the readiness with which he supported these claims against Maduro. By doing so, he is supporting the U.S. empire, and he should have known that, and now he will take the consequences for that fateful misjudgment.
Professor Van Pyle, I just want to get your views on Venezuela and also on Ukraine. BlackRock is going to move into Ukraine, and it's going to be fantastic for Ukraine. And we have Paul Singer, who they are saying that he'll be benefiting greatly from this Venezuelan coup, which it's not. But what's your views on these, and I won't say terrible people or organisations, but the last thing, if you were to save a country, the last thing you do is plant BlackRock to make all those important decisions, or Paul Singer, for example, in Venezuela. What's your views on that? I mean, it seems to be more that there's nothing about freedom. If you look at Ukraine, to put BlackRock there, it's the last thing they want is freedom and public discourse. And the same thing with Paul Singer and his organisations and others like him for Venezuela.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important here to connect the role that Trump is playing to the influence of Israel. Actually, Netanyahu was in Mar-a-Lago, the residence of Trump in Florida, when the Venezuela invasion happened. He's now left, but his wife stayed behind. And many people draw the conclusion from that the United States is about to attack Iran, because there have been, I don't know whether you mentioned that before I came on, but there have been regular flights with the largest types of American military transport planes with material into bases in Europe. Russia has, for instance, withdrawn its embassy personnel from Israel, and I think all these things indicate that we are about to see an American-Israeli attack on Iran. Don't forget that one of the miraculous explanations that the United States gave for its actions in Venezuela was that Hezbollah played a large role in organizing the cartels and links like that. So I think we are looking at a wide-ranging sort of final contest between the United States and Israel, with Europe limping behind against basically the rest of the world. And I agree with the duplicity of, with the remark that Oliver made about duplicity of Brazil's Lula, but then he has always been the representative of the World Economic Forum inside the BRICS, I would say. Basically, the whole BRICS operation boils down to China and Russia, and they have the muscle, they have the money, and in my view, they also have the intelligence, which is coming out through their legal actions that they are taking. But of course, legal actions always depend on the continued state of law, and if that breaks down, then legal action don't count for much any longer.
Oliver, do you want to respond to that? Because it's a very good point there from Professor Van.
Yeah, I think yes. So, is it possible? Is one of the things about Venezuela? Is it merely a distraction? I'm not. I think there are lots of reasons for what's going on in Venezuela. But yes, I do think there is credit in the argument that this is a distraction, in part from the upcoming. The next invasion by the United States and Israel of Iran. Iran seemed to recover from the 12-day war in June reasonably well. Many people thought, in fact, it had come out stronger from that experience. I'm not sure about that. But to my mind, what it shows is that whatever the strengths of the security arrangements between Russia and Iran, they actually don't count for that much at the point of crisis. And I also very much regret that, of course, Iran has had such terrible problems with respect to water shortages. These are very grievous indeed, leading even to speculation that it would be necessary to amazingly evacuate the city of Tehran, which is just an astonishing thought that water shortage could be that serious, that actually is an option that is being seriously considered in Iran. That's bad enough, not to mention the pollution. And now, of course, we have these riots. I'm not there. I don't really know. But of course, our experience of recent history will advise us that we must assume that the riots, at least in part, are being incited by MEK and other third column US supported organizations in Iran. Although, but at the same time, it's also very obvious, and the Iranian authorities admit that there are severe economic problems in Tehran. And excuse me, I've got a noise here and I'm going to have to stop it. Yeah. The country, to my mind, is ready for a fall.
Yeah, it would seem so. And Greg, I could see you in the background negotiating 1,001 Bangladeshians getting into your office. And well done, by the way. Maybe they could parachute you into the next country they invade. I can see other countries such as Cuba, Colombia. Why not go after Europe? I mean, which he's sort of tempting because I want that bit of land called Greenland. It's really good, and they've made a movie about it, so I want it now. Do you think besides parachuting, and this is a terrifying thing, much worse, and I think you will agree, than a nuke attack, is to parachute, Lindsey Graham down into there, and he'd be like a Rambo, and he'd be It'd be a very scary proposition, but taking away the jocularity of a very serious situation, it can escalate very quickly. And Donald Trump seems to, and the military seems to think that they can control the way a war goes, and you can't do that. Wars have their own mind, and they go whichever direction they want to. So he's playing a very dangerous game, isn't he? What other countries besides, well, what other planets besides Earth do you think Donald Trump will be taking over very shortly?
Well, I mean, he's made his points clear, and I think what some of the other speakers, such as Keith, is saying is the influence of Israel, and especially Netanyahu, where he just happened to be coincidentally in Mar-a-Lago when not only had the renewed talks about Iran, but also you had the illegal invasion and attack on Venezuela, because Venezuela had made a stance against Israel. So you got that particular point. But I mean, Trump has been threatening all kinds of ones. I mean, the three stooges of Trump, Hegseth and Rubio, they look like something which has been parachuted straight out from Dr. Strangelove, because they're so deluded in their own superiority, which is they're doing a Beerbach 360 on this, because there's nothing superior about these cretins at all. I mean, that they are clearly out of their depth and on this power trip. And of course, when an empire in decline goes on a power trip and does not know the sensible limits of what happens, of actions and consequences, then things can really get out of control. I mean, he's already talked about taking Canada, and I mean, of course, Greenland. It's just this wholesale garbage. I think Zelensky, aka the Green Goblin, has been sharing some of his recreational means with Trump and these inner echelon of the administration, because there's an absolute divorce from realities. They've got these wishes and these projections. And I mean, if we look at the beginning of the administration, they actually admitted they are in decline. And when you do this kind of stuff, it's going to accelerate the decline. I mean, for example, China is quietly selling off its dodgy holdings of US debt, which I don't think many countries would want to hold that now, because the dollar has been so utterly and grotesquely weaponized that it's a liability. And with Europe, which is increasingly being called the EU SSR around the world, I mean, who's going to invest in the European economy? Because they have been robbing the Russian frozen assets, but it tells you that the West, whenever it's convenient, will breach any kind of international law for a short-term gain. And that's what it is. It's a short-term gain, but in the medium to long term, there are going to be severe consequences which are going to be negatively affecting them.
Yeah, I agree. Professor Vanderpyle, I'm just thinking about if Donald Trump, along with Lindsey Graham with his machine gun bullets and stuff, Rambo, I'm just thinking though, if they keep doing what they're doing, how do you see the price of oil? It'll be a big, beautiful profit margin, I would imagine, for a very small amount of.
Yeah. Well, the whole energy situation is already a caricature of what is really needed. If you think of the advance here in Europe, notably of windmills here in Holland, where we have very little sun. We have entire patches of agricultural land now being set aside for so-called solar meadows, We even have floating solar islands trying to catch the sun on the North Sea. So apparently, no rationality is not a key driver of the long-term energy policy. If you think that there's coal for hundreds of years, that there's gas for at least a century. By blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines, by destroying the South Stream pipeline in the Black Sea before it was even built, Europe has cut off its energy supply and handed itself over to the United States. I think we have to keep in mind there is a big shift in world affairs at the expense of the West. But at the moment, the West is still militarily far superior, simply in quantitative and qualitative terms. And that means that if there's a chance for the United States, notably, to destroy its opponents, it is now. And there is, of course, the additional factor, especially when it comes to timing, that the Epstein revelations in the United States make it particularly difficult for Trump to sit that out. If you read the 2 volumes of Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail, you can see that all the people who are on the Epstein list are in hot waters, and if there's one man especially vulnerable, it's Trump. Of course, we shouldn't get into that sort of gossipy stuff, but sometimes these things play a role in timing. And I think the timing of the U.S. attack on many fronts, which we are going to see in the next coming weeks, has a lot to do with that.
I'm just thinking.
Aspect.
I'm just thinking. We have actually run out of time, so I do apologise. It's just gone like 2025 went very quickly. I've got Greg. First of all, yourself. How far can Donald Trump push, and is he under the control of inverted commas deep state?
He is definitely not his own free agent. I mean, this is clear because what you saw, I think these so-called assassination attempts before the election may have been a signal to him. You need to toe the line, otherwise this can be a consequence. Because he made a big brave scene about it, but that's going to shake you up. Because if we look at his whole platform, he's going to be a peace president. Well, judging at the rate he's going and the utterly corrupt nature of the Norwegian Nobel Peace Prize Committee, he will definitely earn his Peace Prize this year. I mean, another war with Iran and other countries will just seal that Peace Prize beautifully, gift wrap it. But he's not free to do what he wants. I mean, this is clear. And you just look at how the relationship with Netanyahu, where he tries to look like the boss. But if he's the boss, why is Netanyahu ignoring him and telling him, F off, we're going to do what we like and you're going to support us? And then after a while, he just meekly trots along. I mean, it's like the relationship between the EU and the US in some regards. You know, the EU trying to say we're an independent global power, and then do whatever the US commands it to do. So, in this respect, I mean, I think, as the others have hinted, that there are going to be more wars. Perhaps the next one could be Iran, I think is going to be another misjudgment. But this is in part going to be the result that the drunk on power after this short-term tactical victory in Venezuela is going to encourage them to be increasingly reckless and to go into things which you should never go into and expose themselves to all kinds of counter moves.
Oliver, how do you think this will end for Donald Trump? And do you think Donald Trump is controlled by deep state, inverted commas?
Yes, probably. But I think one thing I want to do here in the last few moments is to kind of correct. I totally get why we all want to talk about how crazy and mad and stupid Trump is, and he probably is all of those things. But there are some logics at work here. I've talked about defense of global hegemony, but at a lower level of priority, perhaps. But there are significant problems here for Russia and for China, and some significant gains for the United States. So let's not. So first of all, Russia. If the United States gets control over Colombian oil, and it pretty much has already achieved that, and is able to exploit it, it will have much more power to influence, if not to control, oil prices on international markets. And this could be used in a very damaging way for Russia's oil exports. We've already seen China express concerns that because of threats to its oil supply from Iran, and now a very strong threat to its supplies from Venezuela, that China is now going to be cut off from sources of oil that can be obtained without the use of the dollar. China is being coerced into using the dollar, depending on the dollar for its oil trade. So I think that is a big problem, and is a big problem for the BRICS in general. We've also people are not talking very much about Guyana, to the immediate south of Venezuela. Venezuela has had a long-standing claim to the Essequibo oil deposits in Guyana, which account for about 2/3 of Guyanese territory. The United States, of course, is very concerned about this. As late as the end of 2023, there was a sort of some kind of naval intervention by Venezuela in the port of Georgetown. There were many signs that Venezuela was preparing for some kind of fairly coercive and aggressive takeover of Guyanese oil. Guyanese oil is much better than Venezuelan oil. It's light, it's easy to extract, it's cheap, in other words. And from the American point of view, well, ExxonMobil is a prime player in the Guyanese oil market already, whereas, of course, in Venezuela, the oil companies have been pretty much, under Maduro, have been pretty much reduced to Chevron. So I'm saying what I'm trying to say is basically there are all kinds of reasons to be angry and to be upset. Just because they're stupid doesn't mean to say that they're actually not winning.
And finally, Professor van der Pijl, just if you could add to from Oliver's probably narration just then, but also, how do you think it will end for Donald Trump?
Well, it ends when his term runs out, and he will then be destroyed by the blackmail materials that have piled up against him and his wife, not to be forgotten. But I fully agree to what my colleague Oliver said, and that is that the rationality of state actions don't run through a particularly bright mind of its president. It can be a total idiot, and let's not overrate the previous presidents. Of course, now we have a caricature of Mussolini at the helm, but he hasn't too much to say on these matters. So the rationality of the United States is indeed to gain control of the critical levers of power, and that is energy, money, and having an enormous military behind it. Donald Trump has now asked for a $1.5 trillion military budget, and of course, 1/3 of that is drained by corruption, but the rest will be turned into hardware and more bases. There will be a basis in Damascus, for instance, is now being planned, an American military basis. There will be a basis in Israel is being considered. So there are many reasons to see that the United States is making a final effort in trying to interrupt its long-term decline, but today still has the means to enforce its presence in the world at at our detriment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Gentlemen, I'm sorry that we've run out of time. This is something we should talk about more often, so Jen will get back to you very shortly on continuing part 2 of this. Dr. Greg Simons, Professor at Daffodil International University, Bangladesh. Professor Emeritus Oliver Boyd Barrett from BGU State University, and Professor Kees Vanderpyle, political economist and author. Thank you very much for your time. This has been The Protagonist, our first one for 2026. And talking about all sorts of things. I still think they need to parachute Lindsey Graham in there with his bullets across his chest and another version of Rambut. He'll create all sorts of chaos and leave the place much neater when they retreat. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us. This has been The Protagonist, and this is The World Today.